Hello everyone, it's me, the TSMU fan, and today I've decided to go ahead and share with you guys my top 10 favorite Thomas episodes. This is technically the second part of my 1000 subscriber special. As you already know, for my 1000 subscriber special, I uploaded a remake of That's What Friends Are For. I've decided to add this onto my 1000 subscriber special as a sort of bonus. After watching the Unlucky Tug's top 10 episodes and Thomas 1 Edward 2 Henry 3's top 20 episodes, I've decided to take inspiration from them and make my own top 10 list. It was really hard to pick out episodes I liked, as I like all the episodes, almost all of them, but I've managed to pick out 10 episodes that I consider as my favorites. So, without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Thomas episodes. Number 10, Thomas and the Tuba. Okay, I know exactly what all of you are thinking. A new series episode on a top 10 list? Come on, we all know the classic series is better. And while that is true, I still consider this episode as one of my favorites. As a kid, I had the songs from the Station DVD, and this episode always stood out to me. It's just so classic. I love how we get to see a variety of characters such as Elizabeth, Harvey, and especially Trevor. Now people might say, "Oh, this story is unrealistic. The tuba player should have waited at the station for Thomas." I totally agree, but the tuba player would most likely decide to head out on his own so that he isn't late. Sure, people might say, "Oh, Bertie should have taken the tuba player all the way to the performance," but once again I say that perhaps Bertie had too many passengers traveling inside him and had to let the tuba player off to pick someone else up. The crash is great too, and I give credit to the writers for having Percy be angry with Thomas. This really builds on their relationship and shows that they aren't always the best of friends, and I love that. I also like how the main premise of the episode is that it is Lady Hat's birthday. I mean, sure, you could say, "Haven't seen that before," and yes, the same idea is used, but I think Thomas and the Tuba takes it to a new level. Overall, I like the choices for the roles, and this episode was always memorable for me as a kid, and it still is today. Number 9, Percy, James, and the Fruitful Day. This is one of the many episodes that played a big part in my childhood and that I will always remember. I love how the episode starts out with James bragging to Percy. James is just such a fun character in the early seasons of Thomas, always bragging to the other engines that he's the best, but then eventually getting his comeuppance, and this episode is no exception. First of all, I absolutely love the way George Carlin delivered Percy's line.
"Bossy buffers," muttered Percy.
That line will always stick with me. I also love the harbor shots of James taking the fruit, and I love how Percy throws what James said to him right back at him. I love it when the characters do that. Additionally, I loved Percy's crash in this episode. I don't know about anyone else, but that shot where Percy's driver applies the brakes and the close-up of that one troublesome truck always freaked me out. I've also noticed that the episode title is a pun. The title is Percy, James, and the Fruitful Day, and in the episode, Percy gets covered in fruit. I think that was a very clever decision. I also love how George Carlin delivers Sir Topham Hatt's lines in this episode. I'm not the kind of person who complains about the Sir Topham Hatt blaming engines for things that were out of their control cliche, as I think that in this episode it was actually kind of Percy's fault as well. One of the lines says,
"He didn't see that the switch had failed and that he had been diverted into a siding."
So in my opinion, Percy was at fault for not stopping in time. I also love how the episode ends with the engines learning that all of them are really useful. Sure, it might be overused today, but I thought it worked nicely here. Overall, Percy, James, and the Fruitful Day was a good episode as a kid, and it still is today. Season 3 is one of my favorite seasons for episodes like this. Number 8, Old Iron. There aren't a lot of episodes from seasons 1 and 2 on this list, mostly because either I don't remember watching them or I didn't have a DVD with episodes on it. Old Iron, however, was on the Best of James DVD, and I will always remember this episode. First of all, I love James's interaction with Edward at the start of the episode. Once again, George Carlin's line delivery is just perfect here. I will always remember the way he says,
"Late again!"
James then complains to Thomas and Percy about Edward being slow, and again, I love the episodes where James brags to the other engines, only to get what's coming to him later. James then leaves without his driver and fireman, and we get what I think is one of the best chase scenes in Thomas and Friends. I was on the edge of my seat with this episode, from the excellent runaway theme by Mike and Jr., the shots of Edward trying to catch up to James, and the tension of the fireman trying to hook a noose onto James's buffer to slow him down. I love how it ends, with James apologizing to Edward about what he said, and Edward getting to go to the works to be mended after the chase. We definitely feel a connection with Edward, and it's kind of like getting a reward for doing a good deed or something like that. Anyway, Old Iron was an intense story and was an excellent episode. Edward is truly a hero for rescuing James. Number 7. Duncan Gets Spooked. Season 5 was an extremely interesting season. It had a lot of dark and spooky stories, and I will always remember this one. I had the Spills and Chills DVD as a kid, and I really liked this episode. First off, I loved the truck's crash at the beginning. I now want to take the time to say that the most memorable part of Thomas was, to me, is the crashes. As a kid, I absolutely loved the trains crashing, and I still like the crashes to this day. Second of all, Rusty's ghost story is just so spooky. I don't really remember a lot of the crashes from the show, but this one is one of the few that I'll always remember. As a kid, I'd think that the trains would be fine after the crashes, as the narrator says, luckily no one was hurt after the crashes happened. For this one, it was a different story. The way the spooky music played and the shots of the engine falling into the water told me that the engine would not be alright after this crash. My thoughts were proved correct when the narrator said,
"He was never found again."
The way Alec Baldwin delivered that line was just so ominous and scary. I'll always remember the ghost train's crash. It was a very dark and spooky experience that, from description, sounds like it wouldn't belong in a kid's show. Additionally, I love how the driver and fireman tricked Duncan into thinking he saw the ghost. The way Baldwin delivered the line,
"Take me back! Take me back, please!"
was just so scary and unsettling to me as a kid. It was definitely a spooky episode, and one that I'll remember forever. Number 6. Rusty and the Boulder. Another episode from the Spills and Chills DVD. This episode is one that will always be in my memory. The beginning music with the shots of Boulder are just so ominous, and the atmosphere makes it feel like something bad is going to happen. Thumper is also an interesting character. It's a shame he only appeared in this episode. He could have been used for something like the Jack and the Pack series, in my opinion. The part of the episode where Rusty looks at the boulder is just so ominous and a little spooky. The atmosphere, again, is brilliant. It just feels so mysterious, and the way the face fades onto the boulder is really spooky. We then get another one of my favorite chase scenes from the show. The way Boulder chases after Rusty makes me think of Indiana Jones when I watch it today. We also get to see Rheneas crash, which has never happened before, and I absolutely love this line and the way it was said by Baldwin.
"Better a smash than a squash."
We then get one of the best crashes in the series. The boulder crashes into the sheds and causes an explosion. I'll always remember the explosion, and as a kid, it was my all-time favorite Thomas crash. I also really like the way Baldwin delivers this line.
"We should have left this part of the island alone."
It's just so mysterious and ominous, and that's what I love about this episode. This is unrelated to the episode itself, but as I'm typing this part of the review, I can hear the Indiana Jones theme playing in one of the other rooms of my house. I really think that's ironic, but anyway, this episode was always a good watch as a kid, and it still is today. Rusty and the Boulder is an amazing, mysterious, and an Indiana Jones kind of episode. Number 5. Toby's Discovery. This is yet another episode from the Spills and Chills DVD, and I'll say this. Toby's discovery is an amazing, spooky, and legendary episode. I loved the beginning. Sir Topham Hatt and his grandchildren go to the beach and the children build a castle. They show the real castle, which is on a map, to Sir Topham Hatt. I love this part of the episode. The way Baldwin delivered the line, is just so funny, and also is mysterious at the same time. Another reason why I like Toby's discovery is the grand adventure that makes up the plot. The scenery of the forest shots, especially when Toby finds the signs that tell them where to go, is just so beautiful. I also want to again point out the brilliant score that Michael Donnell and Junior Campbell composed for this episode. The music has just such an adventurous feel to it, and when Toby finds the castle, again, the scenery in this episode is just beautiful. I love the shot of the old castle, and I'll always remember it. Toby then finds an old overgrown yards. When I saw the Thomas scrap model in the yards, I was like, what is that? Is that Thomas without a face? It was, and I'll always remember that because in a way that model was projecting the theme of season 5. Dark, spooky, and mysterious. Toby then has to stay at the yards overnight, and the music is just so scary here. I never noticed this until now, but if you listen closely, the music has renditions of Ring Around the Rosie inside of it. Knowing now the real meaning of that song, that just makes the episode 5 times more spooky. The sound of the wheezing also scared me as a kid, and it made me jump. I love how Baldwin delivers Toby's lines here. He really sounds scared and intimidated by whatever's making that noise. We find out that the spooky old warrior engine is in fact Bertram. Bertram is just such an interesting engine. I know that he's just a recolor of Duke with Smudger's face nowadays, but he's just such an interesting character and I wish he would have appeared more. Anyways, Toby's discovery was an amazing but spooky episode, one that I'll always remember. Number 4. Ghost Train, or Percy's Ghostly Trick. I think it's pretty obvious that this episode would be on the list. It's one that everyone remembers, and so do I. I have to point out the music. The Ghost Train's theme is just such a scary and intimidating piece. I think it's one of the spookiest pieces of music I've ever heard in my life, next to Lavender Town from the Pokemon series. I also love how the entire episode is covered in fog. Every single set the engines are in have fog all over the place, and I absolutely love that choice. I also love that, again, this is one of those episodes that shows that Thomas and Percy aren't always friends. Thomas completely disbelieves in Percy's story, and then Percy gets his own back by scaring the steam out of Thomas. I also love the crash. Again, the part of Thomas I remember the most is the crashes, and this one is no exception. I also love the shot of Toby crossing over the watermill. It's just such an atmospheric shot, and it really shows that Sodor is a lot bigger than it seems. I also love George Carlin's ghost voice for Percy. It's just so funny and so spooky at the same time. I also really loved the ending with that last line.
Anyone would think, chuckled Toby, that our Thomas had just seen a ghost.
It's a spooky line, and I love how they echoed the last word to give it a more spooky, scary feel. Anyway, Ghost Train, or Percy's Ghostly Trick, is an amazing, spooky episode, and definitely one to watch around Halloween. Number 3, All at Sea. Yes, another Season 3 episode is on this list. This episode was on the 10 Years of Thomas DVD, and I absolutely love it. It's such a good story. Duck wants to go to places beyond the horizon, and I love how he learns that staying at home with your friends is better than going off on an adventure. I really wish that Mattel would watch this episode and then cancel Big World, Big Adventures, as that series basically just contradicts the entire premise and message of this episode. Additionally, this is also one of the rare episodes where someone is actually hurt, and we don't get a luckily no one was hurt from the narrator, and I love that. Not everyone gets out of an accident unscathed, and I really like the message of that, especially nowadays. I also love the music that's featured in this episode. For starters, the remix of the Harbor theme at the beginning is just so beautifully done. I've also heard that apparently Mike and Junior wanted to make a sing-along song using this theme. It's a shame they didn't go through with it. This arrangement of the song is just so gorgeous, and I would have loved to hear it as a sing-along song. I also enjoy the music that plays when Duck is taking the man to Bertie to take him to the hospital. Mike and Junior did such a good job composing music for the show, and I cannot say how much their music has stuck with me over the years, especially the ending music here. Coupled with the ending lines from the narrator and the brilliant scene of Thomas, Duck, and Percy looking off into the sunset, this moment will always stick with me, and I'll always remember it as such. It was the last episode on the 10 Years of Thomas DVD, and boy was it an amazing conclusion to an amazing celebration of 10 years of the show. Number 2, Henry's Forest. Yet another Season 3 episode has made it onto this list, and what can I say? This is one of the best episodes of the classic series. I almost considered putting this number 1, but I never watched this episode as a kid and don't have any memories of it. But I'm still ranking this high on the list simply because of how good it is. For starters, the scenery is amazing. George Carlin's narration is so calming and soothing in this episode, and it really captures the episode's feel. You also really feel the pain that Henry's going through when the forest gets destroyed. This episode is basically if Henry and the Wishing Tree and Henry Gets It Wrong were combined together into one big classic series episode. The music, again, is amazing. I absolutely love Henry's theme in this episode, especially when Toby collects the new trees for the forest. The ending music is also brilliant, again, from All at Sea. Additionally, I love the line from Terrence.
Look, Henry, we're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see.
It really makes it feel like you could watch this episode multiple times, and each time would be a new experience. You know, I don't care at all whatever the Reverend Audrey had to say about this episode. I love it, and it's an amazing story that never gets old. And my number 1 favorite Thomas and Friends episode is Trucks, or Rusty Helps Peter Sam. I haven't heard this one talked about as being anyone's favorite episode, but for me, I absolutely love it to bits. It was on the Rusty to the Rescue DVD, which I remember watching a lot when I was little. This episode always stood out to me, and I like it for the same reason the Unlucky Tug likes Special Funnel. The scenery in this episode is just astonishing. Season 4 is definitely one of the most beautiful seasons of the whole show. I also really like this episode because of, again, the crash. This isn't at the top of best crashes in the show, but if it was, it would be in the 5th spot, or maybe in the honorable mentions. The crash is just so spectacular, and heck, a truck even goes flying through the air. It's just such a good episode. Another thing that I like about this episode is the interactions between Harold and Rusty. I absolutely love how at the end of the episode, Rusty says the same thing that Harold said to him at the beginning of the episode. And again, I just love George Carlin's narration. His voice for Harold is spot on and really fits the character. I also love the way he said the line,
"Cheeky chopper."
I think that by far George Carlin would be my favorite narrator next to Pierce Brosnan from The Great Discovery. The music is again amazing. Mike and Junior did such a good job in the show, especially in this episode. Harold's theme at the beginning is so triumphant, and then it switches to a sort of sad arrangement of Rusty's theme that was also heard in Rusty to the Rescue. Anyways, this episode was such a good watch, and I will always remember it. No matter how bad the show gets, at least we still have classic episodes like this that capture the spirit of classic Thomas. And that's why it is my favorite episode. It captures all the nostalgic feelings of classic Thomas, and that's what I like to see, not only in classic episodes, but also in new episodes. Which is why I think that the Brenner era is on par with the classic series. But that's a topic for another time. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode, and I will always remember it for the rest of my life. well, that's about it. Those are my top 10 favorite episodes. If you'd like to share your favorite episodes, please feel free to do so in the comments below, as long as Kappa doesn't get this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you all for 1,000 subscribers, and I'll see you all in the next video. This is the TSMU fan signing out.